It's budget day. What does that mean? That we will be hearing what happens when it concerns what Kenya will spend, what it will be spent on, and where the money will come from. We're going to hear that this afternoon and directly from the Cabinet Secretary. At the same time, the finance bill, which had gone through or continues to go through public participation, essentially is what is going to give life to the budget. It's going to tell you where the taxes will come from. It's going to tell you what domestic borrowing will look like. It's going to tell you what external borrowing will look like. And this essentially is the lifeblood of the budget. After this, it will then probably go and become an act. And from the 1st of July, a lot of what we hear then will become law, and that will happen. Now, dependent on all of that, it is necessary for us to be very aware of many of the things that are happening. This hour, we continue with those conversations. Two of the areas whereby it is very important for us to then be able to discuss as to what then happens with these numbers are in security, as we've just been talking about, and they are also in education. So, joining us this hour, we continue the conversation with Waruku, who is the first chairperson of the Police Service Commission. But we also are joined this hour by Boaz Waruku, who is the strategy advisor of the Elimu Bora Working Group. Waruku, good morning.
Good morning, Du. I'm happy to be back here.
Good to have you here. Karibu sana.
Good.
We're joined by Johnson Kavuludi, who's here, and we're looking at certain issues around both of these sectors. Education has always been the big budget item, and now we are seeing some interesting things happening. And also, we're seeing a shift in security when it comes to those numbers in terms of how Kenya will spend. We'll go into that in just a little bit, but we want to again welcome you, Waruku. Wanakavuludi has had his go at it, but we are going to share today's proverb with you, and I'd like to hear what you think about that. We've come in from Uganda. And this week, that's where we land. But we want to hear what your thoughts are about this particular one, right? The hen that stays at home does not find food. The hen that stays at home does not find food.
That saying is controversial, that proverb, yeah?
Is it?
Because at home is where there should be food.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, but this hen, definitely this is a hen that should be a hunter. So at times it is always good to be out there hunting.
Indeed.
But be very careful, because you can also be hunted, particularly for a hen.
Yes, you can. Okay, well, great to hear that. You can also be hunted, not just going to hunt for the food.
Yes, you can also be kitoweo.
Education and security in budget 2025-2026, promises and priorities. This is what we're looking for. Let me give you an overview of basically what they've told us is going to happen in terms of these numbers, right? Yes. The education sector is facing significant budget cuts in 2025-2026 fiscal year, with a proposed 62 billion shilling reduction. This has raised concerns about the potential impact on various areas, including national exams, capitation grants, and the overall delivery of education services. Some of the key issues and concerns that we're looking at already: reduced funding for national exams. We know that, there's a certain fee that you must pay to sit these exams. A major concern is the lack of funds allocated for national examinations, particularly the KPSEA, KJSEA and the KCSE. The initial budget estimates show zero allocation for exam administration and invigilation. Impact on capitation grants. Reductions in capitation grants for primary, junior and secondary schools are causing concern, particularly in public schools and students from low-income backgrounds. Number 3, threat to education reforms. The budget cuts are seen as potentially derailing education reforms and stalling the implementation of the competency-based curriculum, or now as we see it, competency-based education. That's an overview. We'll go into that in just a little bit. Now, let's look at the security section. The budget faces significant security challenges, including concerns about the allocation of funds to the security sector and potential cyber threats. Increased spending on security, particularly for the National Intelligence Service and the Department of Defense, has sparked debates around the appropriate level of investment and whether resources are being effectively utilized according to the budget summary for the Parliament. Furthermore, the rise of cyber threats necessitate a strong and optimized cybersecurity budget to protect against evolving risks. And we see that from proposed budgetary allocations, we see an extra 100 million shillings then going towards specifically the Directorate of Criminal Investigations. That's an overview. From these two sectors, that's what we're looking at. Let's start off from education. This would be the first time that we see, Boaz, a significant reduction in the amount of money that is allocated for education. Education after defense has always been the largest recipient of funds from the national budget. What's your take about what we see, especially as it concerns a holistic education that Kenya is giving, or said to be?
Thank you, Ndu, and thanks also to Dennis. I don't know where the other Dennis has gone.
So Dennis, we can see him. We can do that because he's having his budget analysis on TV. He's actually on KTN at the moment.
That's
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. But also allow me first to recognize my senior here, Mr. Kavuludi, a great man. He used to supervise my father when he was an education officer in Homa Bay.
Wow.
My dad was a teacher, and I think through that, we become people that we can now interact. Thank you so much. And when you talk about the budget cuts, I think the first, let's reset. Let's just get back to where these matters are. As a country, we know the struggles that we are having or facing in education. And because of that, then this is the right moment that we should have been reflecting and thinking of what should be done so that we do not continue escalating or just continuing with those problems following us each time. Why I'm saying so is because I have looked at the budget, not me as a person, but as our team, Elimobora with the entire membership, including Kenya Human Rights Commission, WASU, and all those agencies. One thing that struck us is that this budget was being done outside of the problems that we are facing as a country in education. I'm saying so because even if they attempted to comply, they should have at least looked at the Munavo report, which has certain recommendations that would have advised them on where to place the weight, where things matter. But I think our analysis, supported by the Budgeti Hub, those are budget experts in this case. They look at the entire budget. But for us, we had sessions where we were looking just specifically at the education one. And we realized that no semblance of an attempt to look at what the Munavo report came up with, that then we should have been addressing and ideally looking at trying to create a remedy. When I start from there, I'm focusing on three key things. One, the transition from the 844 to the the CBC and now CBE meant that a number of drastic things needed to be done, like increasing the infrastructure. And because the infrastructure, throughout the country, the standards that we have in various schools have not been at par. So there are certain schools that exist just because the name is called a school. Where children are still learning under trees. And even if they are not under trees, the kind of buildings where they are hazardous. In fact, the safety of those learners would still be problematic. But with this transition, CBE is bringing about the element of making these learners really to interact with the environment, to be more action-oriented. Of course, we keep on emphasizing that we should not think about developing the mind, just the intellectual capacity, critical thinking, all those skills that are required. But why I'm bringing that is because in those schools, if the infrastructure that we'd expect to help stimulate learning among these learners is still not being prioritized, then we think there's a problem. So there's one thing on the transition, and particularly looking at the infrastructure, we should have been prioritizing and giving it a little bit more resources. Similarly, we should have also been looking at the teachers. The gaps that we have had, and I know that we have diagnosed this and analyzed it to the core, what it means, the number of teachers we have per school and all that. Even if you rush to the JSS, because that is transitory to the senior school, where the gap is largest, we still see that there's an allocation given to TSC to recruit intern teachers. In fact, that to us also means that I think we are dealing with a government that does not learn. When a court declares that recruiting trained, qualified teachers who are ready to teach and terming them interns is anti the Constitution. 237 TSC has been established. They're supposed to register trained teachers. Their work is simply now to recruit and deploy them. And if you convert them back to be interns, the courts express themselves so clearly on this matter, and we should not be quarreling about it. So, but you see that there's a situation where they have still indicated that they'll recruit those intern teachers, and then they're saying they'll be converting those intern teachers to permanent and pensionable. I don't know when, but the provision on that conversion is not there. So in other words, then we'll be dealing with just the intern teachers. But the gap is huge. So when are we going to address those gaps? You'll also be coming to the situation where then, we've had capitation delays. Delays and at some point not even remitted at all. Unpaid, yes, and unpaid. So this the manifestation of this, you'd realize that as we speak now, many of our schools have pending bills. Many of our schools, we are indebted in the education sector. I think the figures rotate between 64 billion and even in the excess of 120 billion.
Unfortunately.
It depends on how you look at it. So even when you started by indicating the 62 billion cut, that is already a hole.
So we're saying that essentially there's a 62 billion shilling cut.
Yes.
But this is over and above the 65 odd billion shillings that is already owed to the sector across schools that has not been paid over the last 6 years.
That's the picture that I'm coming to. And so when you are dealing with such a situation, and then this remittances is also, of course, within the budget, then you can't be talking about how will these remittances go. But the practice, what we have experienced, is such that now the schools are forced to look for alternative means. And you are aware that Limu Bora did a survey on illegal levies, and we published that and said, the reasons why some of these things happen is because the schools simply don't have money, and the heads of those institutions must struggle. Otherwise, parents and everybody else would be crying. So what should be happening? We should have been seeing that there's an attempt really to address that gap. But we are not seeing that it has been done. In fact, I think you've mentioned the aspect where the teachers, you mentioned the aspect where the cuts have been done, but part of what we are seeing in terms of cutting those budgets, I think they are going to really deal with the budget items in terms of, I think, the capitation that you mentioned. It is going to make sure to ensure that our ability to deliver on education really would not be as expected. But there's one aspect I needed also to bring on board, the quality assurance and standards. As we speak now, I think maybe majority of Kenyans have not had and realized the effect of quality in the absence of the National Education Board and in the absence of a well-constituted Education Standards and Quality Assurance Council. These agencies were created by Basic Education Act 2013. Why? Because they have certain important responsibilities, functions which are assigned to them. In the absence, you ask yourself, who does that? Because even the discussion we are having, we should have been now relying on the National Education Board report. We should have been relying on the periodic and annual reviews that the Education Standards and Quality Assurance Council would be giving us. But in the absence, that's why then you find the technocrats within the Ministry of Education, and of course the overlaps by the TSC in attempting to look and enforce issues on quality.
Yeah.
So those we're saying there's a way in which that budget should have been speaking to some of those. And by the way, when I talk about the Quality Assurance Council, there's also a court declaration that actually demanded or commanded the ministry to establish that. I don't know why there's the sloppiness with which some of these actions are to be taken. That makes us still fall behind. So ideally, there should be a little bit more of the resources that we see. Go to the tertiary. The higher the new funding model, of course, you're aware, it is the Limu Bora, Kenya Human Rights Commission, the Students' Caucus, and all who took it to court. And indeed, we canvassed there, and the issues that we canvassed, the courts agreed. Only that there's a small window that the court provided to the ministry, just to try and, in the interim, before an appeal, there's an appeal that is pending, the Court of Appeal. I can't get into the details of that discussion. But pending that appeal, they were told to at least create a mechanism for an appeal system by the learners who fail to get the right amount of funding that they require. Even as that is going on, the capitation to the tertiary, to the universities particularly, you're seeing either they have stagnated or some have actually been cut. You look at the allocations given to Egerton University, for instance. But also when we see the ramifications at Moi University where redundancies are being declared, it means that they are not getting the right amount of money. So all this, I think, just in a nutshell, all that gives us not a very good picture. But we thought that, you say, we are talking about experts who have been brought into the treasury, headed by Mbadi and all these guys. I think they should have been more serious. There are people praising them out there. I'm not one of them because I'm disappointed that they don't listen to what the recommendations by experts say. Should
information not be followed then by action? And I think this is one of the things, whether we're looking at education or we're looking at then things that we've seen that would then be increased by the security sector, for example. Form follows function, we would imagine, and that resources then follow thereafter. There is, and we alluded to this in a previous conversation that we had, Bonakavaludi, that, a lot of the things that we see was based on information that had been gathered. So if you gather this information, you have the knowledge and the understanding, then you would say, okay, this is what we need to do, and this is what the resources should then go towards achieving. And that's why you budget, isn't it? But then here we are seeing that it's almost as if you've just moved things around in this budget that we're talking about, which will be read later on today. But do we use the information and knowledge and understanding that we have to then plan properly? Do we do that? Can you see a manifestation of that?
Well, I must admit that I haven't really seriously studied the proposed budget. But I want to, first of all, commend the work of Elimu Bora and your incisive, analysis of what obtains in the education sector before I take a look at the security which we have been discussing. I particularly take note that you have done commendable work in especially trying to get the ministry to understand that a lot of what is happening is not well grounded in good information, and there hasn't been sufficient consultation which has been carried out. I particularly like what your view is on the intern teachers. As a teacher, as an education manager, I got a little lost. I still am at a loss to understand why a trained teacher, qualified, registered, should now be employed as an intern. What does that translate to? Because we even look at the Education Act, we see the TSC Act, and we don't find any reflection of an internship in the teaching profession at all when it comes to trained teachers. Unless this is being looked at as a way of trying to save money by paying them a paltry sum of money for salary.
15,000 a month.
But that is not helping the education standards. We should have proper budgeting of the kind that ensures that when you employ a teacher, he's a full or she's a full-time teacher who is properly paid and who will be able to carry out the function the teachers are intended to carry out. Then we can pride in having employed so many thousands of teachers, because that is what good budgeting will require. But that is yours. But I still see that we need to do better than we are doing when it comes to managing education, and even with the CBE
now.
Yeah, yes. From CBC, CBE. Yes. All it tells us is that the ministry did not do its work right, including piloting. Because if proper piloting as had been done on the CBC or CBE, we will not be seeing all these changes. That today is CBC, tomorrow is CBE, and then we end up juggling around to the extent that even the teachers, the educational managers get confused about it. I'll also say there was no need to change the structure just because we are talking about CBE. The structure of education is what is now giving us the problem of having to get extra classrooms, equipment, what have you, and there are some classrooms and other facilities in high schools that are idle. So if we are looking at the curriculum, you can change a curriculum without changing the structure.
Sure.
And it works out very well.
Thank you so much.
That's for you, but it's good for all Kenyans.
Sure.
Now, when it comes to the security sector, we are talking about what will need to be done in order to see a properly functioning security infrastructure, security operations in this country. I start off by indicating that even though many people think so much money has been allocated to security, is so inadequate when you consider that security comes first before you consider the stability of other facets, the stability of the economy, stability in education, stability in agriculture, and so on. There has to be proper security. And as it is now, the police officers that you see, whom we have also indicated that will need to undergo a lot of training and retraining, especially with the soft skills, it calls for good funding for that to be done. The government has done very well in providing motor vehicles. It's easy now for police officers to reach out and carry out their function, including the famous Subarus, of course. But what is important is that it's no longer the situation that I saw in 2012 or earlier, when you'll be told we don't have mafuta, we do not have a motor vehicle. Can you hire a matatu so that we carry out this or that? The government has done very well in that regard. But visit a normal police station and you realize that there is a lot that is missing. We do not have supplies. We do not have paper. We do not have small things of the kind that make it possible for those officers to function. And that is what you really should have given the quality of security, the level at which there will be satisfaction in performance. So I am really saying that this additional sum of money, for example, which is going to the DCI, is justified. You know, cybersecurity today happens to be one of the greatest concerns anywhere in the world. And if we are not cyber secure, I assure you, as a nation, we are in a very, very bad state. So it is justified. But I think that other than that, we should think beyond the hardware when it comes to managing the security and funding it properly. I see police officers often being told, or rather complaining about their pay. The truth is that there is underfunding, and therefore they may not be paid what they want. But also there has been a significant improvement in the pay for police officers. And that's why I was saying that the Maraga task force made good recommendations on the pay for police officers. Nothing very different, but at least it emphasized what we always thought should be the case. So if, for example, we are looking at a sub-county or a county police operation, we should be in a position to start off there and say, what is it that will be required for them to function optimally? And I think that we need to put in a lot more thought than is currently the case.
Okay. We're just looking at budget 2025-2026, and some of the items that we're looking at that receive a lot of attention: education sector, security as well, in the light of what is going on in the country at the moment. Boaz Waruku, who is a strategy advisor with Elimu Bora Working Group, as well as the first chairperson of the Police Service Commission, is Johnson Kavaludi, and we're here this morning talking about some of these issues as we look towards the budget that will be read later on in the day, and then what will essentially become law later on with the Finance Act. Where are we, and what are some of the things that can be done concerning that? Today is budget day, and in about 6 or so hours, the budget will be read. It's significant because we are looking at the blueprint for which Kenya will spend its money from wherever it gets it in the next 1 year, whereby we see that there are issues upon which Kenya's money is necessary to be spent. Sometimes we ask the questions about whether the priorities are actually right. With a big budget of 656 billion in this year that's ending for education, Boaz, we are seeing that there will be a cut. So that takes us to about 500 already, brings us down to about, give or take 595 billion. So that would be the cut that we see. However, even within that, we've seen that the money that would have been allocated towards education, remember that you make the budget, you have the finance bill, which becomes the Finance Act, yes, and then you have appropriations. Yes. That is essentially where you are saying, this is where you're going to get the money from. Sure. This is where it's going to come from. So this goes according to the budget. So there would be no reason why you wouldn't spend the money for the things that you said you were going to, especially when you have an appropriations bill, which then comes into place. So with education now being defunded, because that's what's happening in this budget this year.
Thank you for using that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How will we achieve the things that need to be achieved, especially when we have new reforms? Mm-hmm. There was a party that went around for a year.
Yes.
And these are the reforms that we're talking about across basic education, primary education, secondary education, tertiary through towards the university level and beyond.
Yes.
How then, if you defund it in this budget, do you expect to bring about the reforms and to bring about the developments that we see? For example, we are going into STEM pathways, we are going into humanities pathways and other pathways from 2026. How will these things happen with the defunding of this sector?
Thank you, and I'm happy that you're the one who's introduced the term defunding. As a Limubora, we have used it Anytime we use it, people think we are enemies of the state. We are not. So I'll use it more effectively. But allow me just to step back first and also indicate that Kenyans should understand that the budget making process is their process. This is the time when they, as the owners of the resources, are actually telling you, you are like the employers, just take your home state. These are the resources I have. I want my security people to do this. I want the gardener to do this. I want this to do this. They are not the ones to tell you that we want this money for ourselves. No. So turn it upside down, because that is what our Constitution 2010 did. So this process of budget making, of course, it is not a one-day kind of thing, the way it used to happen in those periods. But it takes quite a lot of time and the process, up to and including the time when the government comes, or the executive comes to Parliament and presents, that's the Treasury, let me just call it, not the executive, but the Treasury, presents the budget policy statement, the BPS. Because at that particular moment, then you should have been knowing these are the priorities that we hope will be funded in the financial year we are anticipating. That budget policy statement was tabled in January. We interacted with it, though even before we had been interacting with the issues in education. And indeed, we made a memoranda. We presented a memoranda and suggested what we considered should have been considered as the priority. First, the fact that when such statements come, they start telling you, education, you already have the lion's share.
Yes.
I think that should be disabused, because education must always have the biggest share. Because education is everything for a country like ours. Education reaches the doorsteps of almost every household you have. You have learners there, you have teachers there, you have everybody in there. So we should not be talking about it as a lion's share. In fact, according to the international standards, we know that the benchmark that UNESCO, for instance, says that when you have that huge budget, the national budget as it is, then not less than 20% of that budget should go to education. That is a benchmark which Kenya has agreed to. There are those who have tabulated this budget and are indicating that it is beyond that. Our tabulation gives us 17.1%.
Okay.
Meaning that we are still falling short. So that, I'm just trying to say, then we can now not be saying that it is a huge, meaning our parliamentarians should have an opportunity then to readdress the areas we are talking about. If we give them that kind of a background, they'll be able to understand that still education requires more. And education requires more, particularly when we do cost analysis. You start from the very basic level, from the very basic level, PP1, for instance, as of now, PP1, PP2. How much does it cost to educate a young one, or to take a young one through that process? Because there are many things that happen there. The Munavu report that I was talking about, Munavu was given them 1,040 per year, per child per year. And of course, you know that cannot be adequate.
It's not even peanuts.
But it is also not what is being used, because again, in the budget, it is assumed that is a category that then the county governments will be dealing with. Munavu also recommended that from the budget allocation, or the indication, the formula they were using of giving a child at the primary school level, it was 1,450 shillings per year, per child per year. Munavu recommended that you almost double that, because it took it to 2,240. Those formulas have not been used, because if you are to use those, at least those provisions, and you do computation, you'll realize that the math is not mathing or is not adding. So without getting to the details, we are simply asking our parliamentarians that let them not look at this as the end of the budget process. They can still do a lot. They can get to the nitty-gritties and give our teachers and those who are implementing education in this country an easier time. And by the way, those implementing education, we are talking of public education sector. So they should not do the kind of maths that we have seen in that budget. For instance, there's a component on school meals. In the budget, the financial year ending 30th of June, they had allocated 3.6 billion, which was raised through the budget adjustments that was done to 3.9 billion. But in the current budget, they have defunded that to 3 billion.
Okay.
But the math they are doing is also the math that doesn't add up. Because the target of the children who to be fed in the year that is coming to an end, it was 2.6 million children. Of course, that is a very small percentage. But now they want 2.8 million children to be fed when the budget has been cut. You know, those are the things we are asking. Who is doing this math? Or maybe Mwalimu, you could help us. So who is doing the math? We are saying the math is not adding up. And that is not helpful. I think math should be made compulsory throughout. Maybe that is why we still continue.
Maybe that's why we have a problem.
That's why we must continue, because that will help us get some of these facts right. But I'm using those examples simply to tell our parliamentarians, because I know now the ball is in their court. Whatever we are dealing with here, the public also should know. We've already indicated the public, this budget is their process. It is not that your employee is telling you what you're telling them to do, they don't want to do it. No, who are they to tell you so? You are the ones who know that we need our children in school and they need to be supported. They need to be provided for those who are accessing the school meals. And indeed, if you are to go by on the school meals, go by the statement by the president, that he is looking forward to a period when we are going to reach the 10 million learners at the basic education level with the school meals. But you are going backwards. So those are things that we should be consistent. Sorry, Dennis, I think you have a question.
I was just trying to tie in what you were talking about now a security question.
Okay.
We're looking at a budget of policing services 1.8 billion. So there's an increase there. We are seeing defense 13 billion. But you're looking at, for example, IPOA. We earlier spoke about IPOA and the issue of defunding and, asking for more money to be empowered to execute their mandate. IPOA is the principal civilian police oversight body in Kenya. They're asking for money and they need a lot of help. But then there's also the question of, and this is just still on security, it's sort of like whispers around, funding that goes into intelligence, spending, with minimal transparency. And there's also this question of how do we strike then the balance between national security and public accountability? That is one. Two is we've looked at police reforms and how they've stalled and, backtracking and all that. Yet we continue seeing this brutality, extrajudicial killings, they continue. How has the budget provided funding or direction for oversight and accountability? Yes, you're getting this money, but also there's need to have oversight and account for that money.
Accountability has always been the issue when it comes to security. And a lot of people have felt, including myself, that accountability in security has been shrouded in mystery. It is as if when you say so much money is being spent in the following manner by NIS, then you are exposing NIS to the extent that they remain naked. I think in a proper society, a modern society, a society that is open, there is need for accountability to the level where anybody should be able to have an insight into and even question what is going to NIS, what exactly is it going to do? Because we have had in the past, and I still believe that could be the case in the future, where even now, money could probably be allocated to the NIS, and yet it is not intended for NIS. It is intended to carry out something else. But because NIS is not exposed to so much public scrutiny, put the money there. And I'll not be surprised, for example, if anybody was to say that what we are seeing going around now called empowerment programs is part of that, because nobody has told us where that empowerment, cash is coming from. We just see it flowing, and it doesn't really make a good impression of good accountability. But back to IPOA. If indeed we are looking up to a police service that is accountable, that is transparent, a police service that can be trusted by Kenyans, then IPOA certainly needs the money that they are asking for. We know one thing is that IPOA is decentralized. Apart from their offices within the city, they are all over. They are in the counties. Perhaps that is what should also be happening to the National Police Service Commission in terms of the human capital management. Because right now we have got police officers who have to come all the way from the counties in order to solve simple problems related to, to personal issues that could have been solved at the lower level. So I am saying that this 1.8 billion, much as it appears to be quite a big sum of money, it is the extent to which it is targeted towards performing very specific, accountable functions. We would like to see a situation in which, for example, the forensic laboratory for the IPOA is funded. They were talking about having to get what they need going to either the DCI, which means the independence is gone, or going to other institutions where, who have got these forensic laboratories. We are talking about the counseling services that should go to the police officers. Because some of these police officers who go through very traumatizing undertakings need that counseling outfit, which I understand is not funded at all. When we talk about the housing, let it not just be police officers now how can I get better housing. Can we give them an opportunity to even hire houses within areas where the rest of the population stays? In fact, we will be safer staying next to a police officer rather than being concentrated in camps. That is the case that happens throughout the world. And therefore, if we are talking about engagement in budget making for police officers or for the police service or for security, just like is the case in education, involve everybody from the beginning so that it's not coming from the top downwards. The same thing we are saying, the question is, who is informing this budget?
These decisions, yeah.
I hope that it is not the people who are called advisors, because I understand there are quite many of them today.
About 26, yes.
During my time, the advisors to the minister were within the ministry.
Yes.
We had the director, the deputy directors, we had all those people. They're the ones who understood what it is that goes on in that ministry. Why will you pluck somebody from elsewhere and plant him there and say, this is my advisor? What do they know beyond what the director and the rest of the professional staff know? Anyway, it's their policy. But you see, this is where part of that money could be ending up. And I'm not too sure if that is good accountability.
There's 2 billion shillings allocated for the presidential advisors just from the budget.
This budget that will be read this afternoon, we see that perhaps that's where some of that money will actually be going. Running down towards the end of this conversation, but what we've been able to do is been able to point out where the critical matters are arising, and unfortunately, those resources are not following those critical matters. And if it's any indication from these two big issues, then is there cause for worry or cause for concern? Very quickly from both of you.
There is, and indeed, if they're talking of, if we wanted to bridge the gap, and they're saying that the money we are talking about is not necessarily enough, the areas that we could actually remove money from, Mr. Kavulude is very clear. I think as a Limubora, we are saying a lot of money is going to the NIS, and we don't know what they do. Of course, that is a serious concern, because they are getting much more money than even the judiciary, if you are to look at it. So some money is being hidden there when we require money in education. The elements, I think, we have a list of almost 20 areas that we should slash part of the money to bring to education, including the many advisors that we have, not just at the presidential level, but even at the CS level, because how do you hire an advisor to advise the advisor who advises the CS, who is the advisor to the president? And we just try to create layers and people just to be seen to be busy. In fact, they are the people who are confusing most of the sector operations, particularly in education. Because in education, you'll never be hired if you don't have the right papers. And of course, I hope with the quality standards and all that, the wrong papers would also be addressed.
Right.
So we hope that by unnecessarily lumping certain monies there, just bring those monies to education. Let us do a clean job in education, and we'll be able to address most of the problems.
These issues.
Tertiary, we cannot stop without addressing how the lecturers had been promised a lot of the funds. The CBA that is coming to an end, they have a deficit of 8.8 billion that should have been allocated. It is not there. We are going to see industrial action from the WASUs and all that.
That could be expected in the next year.
That should be expected if we are not budgeting for them. But we had committed that would be provided for. So
Indeed.
Those are the hiccups that we see in this budget process. Thank you.
Critical conversations that we had this morning. I want to thank both of you for being here with us this morning. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we then actually hear in concrete what these estimates will be. Boaz Waruku is strategy advisor, Limubora working group, and we've also spoken this morning with Johnston Kalvudi about a lot of these issues, and thank you so much for being here. First chairperson of the National Police Service Commission, Asante Sana, to you both. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.